Hello, hello, and welcome to the Daily Faded. I am Hetz. This is the live stream every night where we get faded and talk about politics and news. So the first thing we do is smoke. All right. I did not get my normal numbers about the coronavirus, but I did see that we're almost to 77,000 lost souls in the United States over the coronavirus. So it doesn't seem to be slowing down right now. Supposedly it's supposed to slow down sometime soon. At least that's what Trump wants you to believe. The biggest news of the day is that Gregory and Travis McMichael were arrested for the murder and aggravated assault of Ahmaud Arbery. There were protests in Georgia, as well as should be, and I'm happy that they arrested these two guys, these two clowns. They're terrible people for what they did. Another 3.2 million people filed for unemployment last week, bringing the total since mid-March to over 33 million. That is catastrophic economic depression when 33 million people lose their jobs in 6 weeks. So Congress has come nowhere near passing the kind of support that people are going to need to get through these times. But I guess I sound like a broken record on that. In Texas, in some places, the food bank lines are 2 and 3 hours long. It was funny, one reporter who I heard talking about the food bank lines in Texas made a comment about how it wasn't just poor people. There was someone in a Mercedes. As if now it's a real tragedy because some rich person got laid off and has lost their income and needs to use a food bank. But it wasn't a tragedy when the poor people needed it. The DOJ is dropping its charges against Michael Flynn, who, I remind you, pled guilty on 2 counts of lying to the FBI. So they're dropping the charges of him. They're basically just undoing the work of the previous Justice Department. They're undoing the work of the previous FBI. They're undoing everything. And it's complete and total corruption. It's just complete and total corruption. New York judge reversed the New York cancellation of the primary thanks to a lawsuit by Andrew Yang. So I'm actually impressed that Andrew Yang did that. I didn't know he was up to that. Good for him. I'm glad they're going to hold the primary. I hope it's entirely by mail. I only hope it's entirely by mail. I don't think they should do an in-person primary. But the Democrats are appealing it and taking it to the next Court of Appeal, and they're suing to not have the primary. And they're claiming it's for COVID-19 reasons. What I don't understand is that it's a state decision, so I'm not quite sure why. I'm not quite sure how they're suing, but they are. And then Trump dumped some CDC guidelines for reopening that had specific guidelines for different institutions like schools and churches and daycares. Team Trump claimed that they were, quote, too prescriptive and that they violate religious liberty, that you can't tell people how to assemble in a house of God. These guys are a suicide death cult. That's all there is to it. They're a suicide death cult, the Republican Party. You know, the Democrats are corrupt and they're terrible, but the Republicans are a suicide death cult. And yeah, they all want to die on the sword for their dear leader. And I don't approve. And really, it probably all comes down to not wanting to prescribe to businesses how they operate in a post-COVID or in an ongoing COVID nightmare. Sorry, I'm packing my pipe a little bit here. Sometimes I just pack more on top when I'm smoking until I get an unbelievable amount of ash. Oh, and we do have a good cannabis story tonight at the end. So, the great Liz Smith wrote a column in the New York Times today. And normally I would not comment on a Liz Smith column, but there have been several of these kind of, I don't know if you call them think pieces or what you call them, about different ways of how Joe Biden can win the 2020 general election. And they're full of all these bright ideas about using the internet and turning Joe's basement from home into a studio that goes into every living room in America. They're fantasies about how Joe Biden can turn the media tables on Trump. So this is from Liz Smith. Quote, if Joe Biden plays his cards right, the death of the traditional presidential campaign will turn out to be a blessing in disguise. The 77-year-old Mr. Biden, whom the president derisively calls Sleepy Joe, can become the hottest bad boy and disruptor in the media game. Does anybody in the world, does anyone in their right mind believe that Joe Biden can be the hottest bad boy and disruptor in the game, in the media game? Does anyone actually believe that? When she writes those words out, do you think that she's really envisioning Joe Biden becoming the bad boy and the disruptor? Is he going to start slamming Trump? Is he going to start beating him at his own game? Nothing about his platform is disruptive. He literally told people at a Wall Street fundraiser that nothing would fundamentally change. That's a true quote. So how can he be the hottest bad boy and disruptor in the media game? She goes on. It seems likely that social distancing will force the presidential campaign to be played out entirely on our screens. That will free Mr. Biden, the presumptive Democratic nominee, of the burden of running a grueling, expensive campaign involving incessant travel. It will also pit him against a master of those screens who has been manipulating them since he was a playboy in New York, and then to when he went to playing a billionaire on TV, and then to when he went to playing a president on TV, and then he went to playing a doctor on TV. Does anyone think that Biden has more screen mojo than Trump? He just doesn't. I shudder at the thought of a Biden Trump debate. First of all, it would be nonsensical, and they'd be arguing. I mean, oh God, it would just be terrible. I mean, Joe making bad arguments, Donald Trump making bad faith arguments. It's just a nightmare. I am going to watch when it happens, if it happens. Quote, instead, he can be digitally omnipresent at a small fraction of the cost and physical toll and create a new paradigm for how presidential campaigns communicate in the press for years to come. Joe Biden has a pitiful presence online. How is he going to do this? You know who had an amazing presence online? Bernie Sanders had the most followers across every platform of every Democratic candidate. In some, many multiples more than other candidates. And that wasn't enough to win the Democratic primary. So she goes on to describe how everyone from Ariana Grande to The Rock to Bernie Sanders can go out there and be amazing surrogates for Joe Biden. It's all just fantasy because there isn't that energy around Joe Biden. You know, do we think we're going to see Ariana Grande getting excited about Joe Biden? I mean, maybe she will. Maybe she'll feel some kind of duty and decide that she has to do something. I don't know. But I just think that these think pieces about Biden are missing the mark by a lot. And it's an unfortunate thing, but they're living in a pre-Trump world. You got to be able to fight dirty with Trump. And I don't see Joe Biden doing that. I mean, he will lie and he will, you know, we've seen in the past that he's willing to steal somebody else's speeches, which is something that he admitted to doing. But I just don't see it up against Trump. You know, I've said many times already, and I'm sure I'll say it many times again, that the 2020 general election will come down to a referendum on how well Trump handles the coronavirus. And if it goes the way the scientists are projecting it's going to go, it may be that Joe Biden could beat Trump no matter what. But you can't doubt the ability of Trump to build the narrative that he wants to build with his own media superstructure that he has. One thing that I thought was funny today, the Daily Fail, if you will, was Brad Parscale, who is Trump's manager, campaign manager, who has gotten filthy, stinking rich off of working for Trump. And Brad Parscale compared the Trump campaign to the Death Star and talked about the Death Star is going to start firing off in the coming days. Now, it's ridiculous to associate yourself with the Death Star. I don't think you want to be the Empire. They're the bad guys. But that said, anyone who thinks Joe Biden is Luke Skywalker, that's also not the case. So if they're coming with the Death Star, I would like to find the pilot who can blow up said Death Star. That would be nice. And, you know, again, he could do it. All you have to do is make a few policy concessions to the left and get people excited. But what do I know? I'm just a guy who smokes ganja and talks about the news. I don't seem to be getting very much from these hits. I think it's time to clean the pipe. All right, so there's something else that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. And no one seems to be talking about this anywhere that I've seen or read, but it seems to me like it's of huge importance to our economy. And that is the amount of debt that this country has. There's $6.6 trillion in corporate debt in the corporate market, which is a rise of 78% since the Great Recession, according to CNBC. That does not include debt held by financial institutions, so that's just corporations. $1.51 trillion in student debt, according to Bloomberg. $930 billion in credit card debt, according to Bloomberg. $81 billion in medical debt. These numbers do not take into account mortgages. This massive debt load is basically unsustainable in the current environment, with businesses having their revenues drop. I think I saw that Disney's revenue dropped by 90% or something like that. They're over leveraged. They've got too much debt, and they're not going to be able to pay off that debt. Right now, they're getting money from Steve Mnuchin, and that's helping them keep the debt afloat. But what's going to happen when this economy doesn't shoot straight back up? What's going to happen 3 months from now, 4 months from now, 5 months from now, when the economy is still sputtering along because we're opening and closing states, because people are dying, because we're not being smart about the pandemic? What's going to happen then when the revenues continue to flag? What's going to happen for people who their unemployment runs out? What's going to happen for people who lose their businesses, lose their entire livelihoods, who don't get that PPP money? The debt burden is a real problem. And dollars to doornails, I don't think that's actually an expression. I think that's one of the reasons why we got the CARES Act, the Coronavirus 3 legislation. That infusion of cash or liquidity is just a euphemism to make it sound like we're not just giving them money, which is what we're doing. Propped everything up, and carrying debt is a feature of capitalism. It's not a bug. It's not a byproduct of capitalism. Financialization of commodities is simply a way to increase profit margins. It has to do with use value versus exchange value. We exchange things at a value that is much higher than what the value of their actual usage is. And a lot of that has to do with financialization of markets. We all have debt. We're all carrying debt, and we're all made to think that that's just the way it should be, that we should all have. Of course you have to pay for your college education. Of course you have to pay for your triple bypass. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we should wipe the consumer debt slate clean or the corporate debt slate. What I'm saying is that these are two enormous areas of concern in our current economy. Look, I do believe at a minimum we should cancel all student debt and medical debt. Just cancel it together and make college free and healthcare free. But I think we should reassess the fundamental role of debt in the American economy, because I think too many people carry too much debt, and it often forces them to stick with jobs that they don't want to be in any longer. Now, on to the big story of the day, which is from the Canigma, my favorite Twitter account. Well, it's one of my favorite Twitter accounts. I like Hideout Munzader's Twitter account an awful lot too. For a guy who threw 2 shoes at President George W. Bush, he is extremely polite. He seems like a very nice chap. So, a writer whose name I have forgotten, Ben Hartman, in the Kenigma, wrote a debunking of things that are being said about cannabis during the pandemic. So there were 4 claims that he wanted to debunk, or at least discuss. Fact check, because I think he was fair about it. Claim number 1, that cannabis dispensaries aren't essential services. Well, this is false for a number of reasons. First and foremost, that a lot of people use cannabis for medicinal purposes. I suffer from chronic pain, and it helps with the inflammation and the pain a great deal. And he cited one person who talked about 99% THC concentrates. And it's like, well, the majority of people who go into a pot shop are not getting the 99% THC concentrate. And the people who do that just do a tiny little bit of it. And they're usually doing it so that they don't have to smoke, because they don't want to inhale smoke into their lungs, or they don't want to inhale as much smoke. Claim number 2, don't smoke marijuana because you'll be too high to talk to your doctor. Some people are making this claim that people will get too high, and as a result, they won't call their doctor when they need care for COVID-19. I don't think that the person who makes that claim has ever gotten high before, because if you were sick the way people get sick with COVID-19, you would notice it and you would call a doctor. Smoking a little bit of weed is not going to prevent that from happening. Smoking cannabis makes your lungs more susceptible to COVID-19 complications. I'm going to quote the author of this piece on the Kenigma.com. Recent academic reviews of medical research have found that long-term marijuana smoking is indeed associated with increased respiratory symptoms, including cough, phlegm, and wheeze. Yes, admittedly. They also found that short-term use can actually open up the airways, and that there is very strong evidence of long-term marijuana smoking not causing airflow obstruction. See that? It's good for you. And then claim number 4 was that cannabis can weaken your immune system. And there really is no research that indicates that that's true, but there is some research that indicates that cannabis can increase your immune system, which would go hand in hand with the idea that people have used it as medicine for centuries. All right, guys, that's the news and politics for today. I'm Nets. This is the Daily Faded. Make sure you hit subscribe and like, and I'll be back at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock Eastern on Monday night. I might do one extra live stream on Saturday this week, because I like to do 4 a week, and I've only done 3. But I'll let you know what's going to happen. Follow me on Twitter at @the_hats. Thanks a lot. Good night.